Good afternoon and welcome to the Legislative Commission's second meeting of 2026. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Senator Daly.
Here.
Senator Dondero Loop. Here. Senator Hansen. Senator Wen.
Here.
Senator Scheibel.
Here.
Senator Titus.
Here.
Assemblymember Backus.
Present.
Assemblymember Hafen.
Here.
Assemblymember Hansen.
Here.
Assemblymember Watts.
Here.
Vice Chair Yeager.
Here.
Chair Sandra Haddagy.
Here, and please note that Senator Hansen is with us. I don't think he reached his microphone in time, but I am looking at him and I know he is present. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Please note that we have members attending both in Carson City, down here in Las Vegas. We have Senator Marilyn Dondero Loop attending for the Senate Majority Leader, and we also have Assemblymember Hafen joining us on Zoom. We do have a quorum, but before we begin our meeting, I would like to go over some quick housekeeping items. If anyone present or listening today would like to receive a copy of the Commission's agendas, minutes, or reports, you may be added to our email list by following the links on the legislature's website. Contact information for the staff is also listed on the legislature's website. In addition, we accept written comments that may be emailed or mailed before, during, or after the meeting. The information regarding where to send written comments is also on the website and listed on the agenda for the meeting. That brings us to agenda item number 2, which is public comment. We will be accepting public comment at this time from persons here at the Nevada Legislature's offices in Las Vegas. Then we will be moving to Carson City, and from there we will be moving to testimony by the phone. If you prefer to wait to speak till after the meeting, we will have a second period of public comment at the end of today's meeting. Please remember that comments are limited to 2 minutes, and if you get to your 2 minutes and you still have remarks, please know that you can submit those as written remarks to be included in the record. We will go ahead and start public comment with people here in Las Vegas. If you would like to provide public comment at this time, please come forward to the table in front of the dais. We ask for, there are 3 seats. Please come up and fill all 3 seats. We do ask that you identify yourself before you begin your public comments, and please state your name and clearly spell it for the record. If you haven't signed in, I would remind you to please sign in at the clipboard by the door before you leave. And again, if you have copies of your comments, please feel free to turn them into our secretary. We can go ahead and begin. We can start here in Las Vegas.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Kelly Guidry, Kelley Guidry. I'm an Air Force veteran, and along with my husband, Peter, who is also a disabled retired Air Force veteran, we are both disabled veterans and co-founded the veteran nonprofit Forgot Not Gone, stumping out veteran suicide through veteran peer support, outdoor recreation. I served in security forces guarding nuclear weapons, aircraft, and personnel. It was physically and mentally demanding work. And while I served honorably, it left lasting impacts on my body. For the past 12 years, I have continued my service in this community, supporting veterans, active duty, Guard, Reserve, and their families. In 2024, I was honored as Nevada's first ever Woman Veteran of the Year. And our organization also received a proclamation from the city of Las Vegas. I don't share that to brag, but to show that I am still serving and contributing meaningfully to this community. For the past 8 years, I have responsibly used pure kratom leaf to manage severe fibroid pain and service-related pain. I was introduced to it through my health food store, not a gas station and not a smoke shop. And I have followed the recommended guidance for 3 to 5 grams from a reputable American Kratom Association approved companies. Let me be clear, the plant is not the problem. The issue is a lack of regulation around enhanced products like 7-hydroxymidazole. Nevada already addressed this through Kratom Consumer Protection Act. Moving toward a Schedule I classification directly conflicts with that intent. If kratom is scheduled as a Schedule I drug, you are effectively saying that it has no medical value and is more dangerous than cocaine. That is not supported by current evidence, and even the FDA has not made that determination. What it will do is criminalize people like me, disabled veterans who served honorably, and force us back into a system where the only options are prescription painkillers and psychiatric medicines, often with serious side effects and dependency risks. I came here today directly from a community event at the Wynn where I had to leave early because this matters. This is what my life looks like continuing to serve. So I ask you to consider the real impact of this decision. Focus on regulation, focus on safety, uphold the intent of the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, but please do not make criminals out of those who have served this country and continue to serve their communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your public testimony today. We can go ahead and go to the next.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the commission. My name is Peter Guidry. I'm a retired Air Force veteran, and I'm a co-founder of Forgotten Not Gone here in Southern Nevada. You know, each week for the past 12 years, I have worked directly with veterans that are dealing with chronic pain, suicide ideation, mental health challenges. And I want to be clear that today I'm here in my personal capacity based on what I've seen boots on the ground engaged in stomping out veteran suicide in our community for those past 12 years. What concerns me today is that the Board of Pharmacy's move to schedule kratom appears to be directly conflicting with the Kratom Consumer Protection Act already established in the Nevada law. The legislation already made a decision to regulate kratom, not prohibit it. The framework was designed to ensure safety, labeling, and accountability. And when an unelected board takes action that effectively overrides that decision of that framework, it creates confusion and undermines the intent of the law itself. In the real world, policy decisions like this don't stay on paper. They impact people, and I've seen individuals seek out alternatives. They're trying to manage pain or improve their quality of life. And when access to regulated options disappear like kratom that we're able to get at a local health supplement store, when those options disappear, the problems don't just appear in our community. And this just isn't about kratom. It's about whether regulatory bodies can override the will of the legislator. So I'm asking this commission to take a hard look at whether the action aligns with existing law and legislative intent, and to consider pausing or rejecting it until the conflict is fully addressed. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you for your public comments. We can go ahead and go to the next person.
Good afternoon, Commission. Thank you guys for your service. My first name is Andrew, last name is Cowie, C-O-W-I-E. I'd like to present two issues that I believe are severe and significant public safety emergency matters. The first, in 2025, approximately 1,137 CCW permit holders were arrested, 5 of which resulted in homicide. The most prevalent, right in front of the Bellagio fountain, husband and wife were shot and killed by a CCW permit holder. Of those 1,137 permits, 5 had been recovered. So I'm taking a pause for a moment. You have thousands of CCW permits that have been revoked by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, but they have not been recovered. So long as those individuals possess those permits, they can purchase a firearm without a background check. That is a significant public safety issue, and the department is not recovering these permits. Item number 2, the next time you see an armed security officer, I want you to ask yourself, is that person a convicted felon? Is that person been convicted of a misdemeanor of domestic violence? The probability is yes. I'm an employer, I own a security company. I've been repeatedly contacted by Metro and the ATF and asked, why is this person in possession of a firearm? The answer is, I don't know. Well, now I found out. The state of Nevada Private Investigators Licensing Board is issuing firearm permits to convicted felons, to individuals who have been arrested and convicted for domestic violence. I was contacted by Metro, had an employee on the clock, on the job with a firearm, and he was arrested for pending sexually related crimes. I've been contacted by ATF and asked, why did you hire this person? The conclusion, The state of Nevada is issuing armed licenses to prohibited persons. Thank you for your time, and I respectfully request that these issues be looked into or addressed. Otherwise, daily, prohibited persons will continue to obtain licensure as armed security officers. Thank you.
Thank you for your public testimony, public comments. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to provide public comment? Okay, seeing no one else approaching the table, let's go ahead and move to Carson City. Is there anyone in Carson City who wishes to provide public comment? Okay, seeing no one approach the table, it looks like we can move to people on the telephone line. If you have called in and you would like to speak during this part of the meeting, you will be notified by our AVH staff. When you have been connected and it is your turn to speak, I remind you to please start with your name and the spelling of your name, and then you will have not more than 2 minutes to give your public comments. You are welcome to submit any additional comments in writing to our committee staff. AVH, can we please go to the telephone line?
To provide public comment, please press *9 or raise hand in your Zoom window to take your place in the queue. You are unmuted and may begin.
I may begin. Thank you. My name is Sunny Valencia. I'm commenting on NAC 385B and AB 184. I'm asking that you pass whatever needs to be passed that allows a student to have a one-time high school transfer and retain eligibility to play sports. I will tell you my son's situation so you have an idea of why I'm asking for this. And I think this issue affects many students across Clark County, maybe across the state. I have spoken with NIA at length, but their hands are tied by the statutes, and passing this rule, the rule that would allow one transfer, will solve many issues, including ours. My son, Eli Valencia, is a junior and currently attends Nevada State High School, a charter school that offers college credit. We are zoned for Foothill High School. Eli attended Boulder City High School his freshman, sophomore, and half of his junior year on a COSA, which is the choice of school assignment. NAC 385B does not allow Eli to play sports at Foothill High School for 180 days, not even sub-varsity, not even JV. He was not being recruited by the school, and NAC 385B does not allow an appeal. AB 184 does not provide for a junior to transfer to another school and have eligibility to play sports unless you have a hardship appeal. Eli just wants to play volleyball and tennis. He will not be going to college to play sports. No one's recruiting him. He just wants the experience of playing sports and being on a team. He knew when he transferred to Nevada State High School that he would not be able to play varsity at Foothill for 180 days, but we thought that he would at least be able to play JV. But NIAA said that he isn't eligible for 180 days to play any sport at Foothill, even JV. This seems punitive. Eli decided to leave Boulder City so that he could get college credit for free, and now he has not been able to play volleyball, which is something he loves to do. When you go to a school on a COSA waiver, you can play JV sports for the first 180 days until you become eligible for varsity. A student should be allowed to transfer one time, or at least a student should be eligible to play sports, at least JV, at their zone school, even if they aren't a COSA at another school. The season is almost over. I don't know if it's possible for you to make any decisions soon that he may be able to play for the last few weeks of the season. Or if he could play tennis in next season, if you guys could move on this. And thank you so much for your time. I also submitted a written comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling in. AVH, next caller, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Gifford, ELLENGIFF as in Frank, ORD as in David. For nearly a year, the statutes on the Nevada Legislative website did not reflect current law. It appears that the Legislative Council Bureau has just completed codifying the results of Nevada's 83rd legislative session. However, over past years, this lack of timely codification seems to have become the norm, and Nevadans have not had reliable access to their current laws. Timely implementation of Nevada's administrative code is also impacted. There are no less than 3 statutes that state that the Legislative Council shall keep the material in the Nevada Revised Statutes and its annotations current. Nevada's legislative website states that the Legislative Commission supervises the Legislative Council Bureau. Nevadans are requesting that the Legislative Commission work together with the Legislative Council Bureau to solve this issue of untimely codification. Today's technologies offer many opportunities to implement a process that efficiently and properly serves Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comments. AVH, next caller.
Hello, my name is Camille Henry Love, CamilleHenrylove, and I'm calling to discuss the regulation and the decision about kratom. I'm not someone who's into all of the scientific parts of it, and I'm not someone who's a lot into government and all of that, so I just want to speak to you as a person. When I was 38 years old, I was T-boned going through a traffic light on my way to work. Subsequently, I had just also had my son 3 years before that. He was a toddler, wonderful boy, but very energetic. Because of that accident, I had my L3, L4 fused, my L5, S1 have pins in them. I have a nerve stimulator in my back that helps my legs and controls the pain. And as you can imagine, I was on tons of medication. Of course, oxycodone was pushed on me. I got to 10, 15 pills a day and wasn't really able to take care of my son. It started to affect my marriage. And even now, you know, my ex-husband and I, we've been divorced. But kratom saved my life. It was something where I stopped taking the drugs that the doctor was prescribing me. I said I didn't like how it made me feel. Then they put me on Suboxone. I didn't like how that made me feel. And I wanted to change my life for my child. Because I couldn't move, I had gotten up to almost 300 pounds. I got really, really big, and things got really hard for me. But I can say kratom has given me the opportunity to be able to exercise, be able to work out. I've lost a lot of weight. My life is better. My ex and I are doing great. But I never would have been able to get there without kratom. I'm not saying to just have it out for anyone to use. Yes, it should be regulated, and I believe that was already discussed. But what I'm saying is don't take away something and now make me a drug addict or someone that can be arrested for a drug that has truly changed my life. It's safe. It's from the earth. It's natural. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comments. AVH, do we have any other callers?
Chair, we have no additional callers for public comment.
Thank you, AVH. And I do want to remind anyone in the audience in Las Vegas and in Carson City and anyone who might be listening online that we will have a second period for public comment after the hearing today. I will also note for the committee members that there were two comments submitted online regarding Regulation R102-25, and they have been uploaded to the committee's webpage if you would like to review those. I do also want to let the committee know that Regulation R102-25 has been pulled and will be rolled until the next legislative hearing, but there are comments on that regulation. With that, we can move on. With that, before we go to agenda item number 3, I do want to pass it over to our speaker, Yeager.
Thank you so much, Chair, for the opportunity. I just wanted to make a comment. We had a few public comments on kratom. I've always called it kratom, but perhaps I'm saying it wrong and I'm not going to say the technical name, but I wanted to let folks know who are here for that. We don't have that regulation in front of us today. There is a different Board of Pharmacy regulation in front of us. And that's because the Board of Pharmacy hasn't formally moved to make it a Schedule I substance yet. They have to do an adoption hearing to do that. So I wanted to let folks know that that decision is not in front of us today. what my recommendation would be, of course, is that has to be a public hearing at the Board of Pharmacy before they could put that regulation in front of us. So stay tuned there. And then if indeed they go forward with a proposed regulation, that would come in front of a future meeting of this committee, this for us to decide whether or not to accept or reject that regulation. So because there were some public commenters, I thought it made sense just to let you all know that that's not a decision before us today, but it very well may be one in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Speaker Yeager. I appreciate that. Okay, and with that, we can move on to agenda item number 3, approval of the minutes. Commission members, you have in your packet the draft minutes for the commission meeting held on February 26, 2026. These draft minutes are also available on the legislature's website. Let me first ask if any of the members have any questions or discussion on the minutes before we accept a motion to approve. Seeing no discussion, I have a first by Speaker Yeager, have a second by Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, committee members. Okay, and that takes us to agenda item number 4, the review of administrative regulations. There are 31 regulations that were submitted for approval. These regulations are all contained in the binder provided to the members and posted on the legislature's website under the tab for this meeting. There is also a public copy on the notebook by the sign-in table at each meeting location. I would like to remind the members and anyone listening that R102-25 has been pulled and will not be considered at this meeting. At this time, I will ask the commission members if there are any regulations to be held for further discussion. Once we identify those regulations, we will take a motion to approve the remaining regulations. Then we will come back to the regulations held for further discussion. I am going to go ahead and start with Senator Daly in Carson City. Senator Daly, I know you have a list of regulations that you would like pulled. Can you please go over those with the committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so there's 4 now that you've pulled 102. So I have R182-24, R202-24, R027-25, and R084-25.
Is there anyone else in Carson City who would like to pull regulations? Okay, seeing no one in Carson City with further regs to be pulled, I will go to Member Hafen. Member Hafen, do you have any regulations you would like pulled?
No, Chair.
Okay, I will move down to Las Vegas and I will start with Senator Dondero Loop.
Yes, Madam Chair, can we pull regulation 083? Hang on. 08 ROs 8325.
Thank you, Senator. Members, are there any other regulations you would like pulled? Okay, seeing none, I will repeat that. Oh, I'm going to go to Senator Scheibel.
Sorry, can we pull 050-25?
Okay, members. I'm going to repeat that list. We have we have R182-24, R202-24, R07-25, R050-25, R083-25, R084-25. Members, any other regulations? Okay, I do not see any other regulations to be pulled. At this point, I would be looking for a motion to approve the remaining regulations under this item that were not pooled or rolled?
Chair, I would make that motion.
Have a motion from Speaker Yeager and a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, the motion is approved. If you were here to answer questions on your regulation and your regulation was just approved, now is the time for you to exit the meeting, and you are also welcome to stay and join us for the rest of the Legislative Commission meeting if you would like. Okay. All right, we will give everyone a few seconds. Now that we've lost half our audience, let's go ahead and move to the regulations that have been pulled for further discussion. I will take them in order, and I'm going to take R182-24 and R202-24, one right after another. We have, I believe, the Public Utilities Commission approaching the table in Carson City. Once they are ready, Senator Daly, if you want to lead us off with questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you're ready. You guys ready?
Sam Crano, SAMCRANO, Hearing Officer, Public Utilities Commission. Yes, Senator, we're ready.
Cool. So I just want to try to make sure I understand. I'm not as familiar with some of these.
Senator Daly, we are having trouble hearing you. Can you speak closer to the microphone?
I'll try. And sorry about that, Madam Chair. I'll try to make sure that you guys can hear me. So I want to make sure or understand a little bit better on the general rate making process versus the alternative rate making process. Are those parallel processes? Are they separate? You do the general rate making one and then you can apply for an alternative. How exactly does that work?
Thank you, Senator. For the record, Sam Crano. The first two, the way the regs are set up, the first two alternative rate-making plans have to be filed either at the same time as a general rate case, a normal one, or within 180 days after. And so they're sort of run in parallel, use the same data. And that's so we can compare the rates and make sure that no one's being harmed by it, because the commission has to find that those are the results of an alternate rate-making application doesn't harm members of the public. And so at least the first two have to be run either in parallel or soon thereafter. And so we can compare the bill impacts, basically. After that, and we're more comfortable with it, they don't have to be necessarily run together or in that close a order. But the first two we did just so everyone's more used to the process, and we can have a better basis of comparison for those first two. And after that, we should have more experience with it and hopefully not need to run in parallel like that. But the commission can always require it if they file even like a third, fourth, fifth, or whatever, not with a general rate case and the numbers looks funny. We can order them to file a normal general rate case so we have the basis for comparison there.
And thank you. And I maybe it's foolish that I mean, so if they have to put in a general rate case and they put in all the data, what's different in the alternative rate filing that they're going to put in? And if the general rate case is there and they're making their points, what does the alternative one generally do? So why would we go through the two things? There's got to be an advantage or disadvantage somewhere, either for the company, and then you guys are looking to see if it's an unfounded advantage, or maybe it's an advantage to the consumer. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Sure. Thank you. Sam Crano for the record, Senator. The idea was because a normal general rate case, the rates are in place for up to 3 years and that's it. This process allows it to be longer if possible, which would cut down on rate cases. I mean, rate cases are expensive. I mean, the company itself spends $500,000 to electric anyway to do a rate case. And, you know, a lot of staff time, a lot of interveners, time and money. And so if once we're comfortable with them, it starts spreading that out. That should save money for everyone, while still allowing the utility an opportunity to meet its costs. It generally, for the first few, what it does is allows for different forms of billing, different forms of collection. So it could be, you know, performance-based rate making. If they meet a certain threshold in savings, they get a little extra return on equity. If they fall below a certain level of savings, then their return on equity goes down. It's allows a little more freedom in building incentives that should hopefully save customers money while then allowing the company to not lose that money. Is the theory. Again, we haven't done one here, so.
Understood, and thank you. So I just not an expert in this area, but I'm learning more all the time. That's for sure. Which gets me to the question that I had when I was reading the regulation. I think in section 15, subsection 3, where it talks about it has to go through your process, has to go to the PUC, has to go to the consumer advocate, the Attorney General's office process. And it says that if you guys modify the alternative, somebody modifies the alternative rate plan, rate making application, and they reject your modifications, it's automatically considered to be withdrawn. In other words, I was just trying to figure out, they put it in, you guys review it. Normally there's going to be a back and forth, I'm assuming, but you're going to say, well, here's our recommendation, here's the change we're making to it, and it's a take it or leave it. There's no, it just seemed unusual to me that you wouldn't have another second review or subsequent breaking of the tie, if you will. It's just automatic withdrawn. Your alternative rate making proposal is withdrawn because we said so.
Thank you, Senator Sam Crano, for the record. Yeah, that was put in, basically the utility puts forward its application and it contains whatever alternative rate making mechanisms they think are appropriate, but then interveners can suggest their own. Our staff, the Bureau of Consumer Protection, oftentimes we have, you know, some of the large casino groups intervene, large grocery store groups intervene, Walmart, and some environmental groups intervene, and all of those folks can suggest other performance-based metrics or other things. The commission can adopt those or not in its final order, and that's why the company has if the commission puts in too many things the company's not comfortable with, they can just withdraw, and we go back to the normal rates that are established through the GRC, the regular normal GRC process that's done at either just before or at the same time. We actually use that process and have for years now with integrated resource planning. When they submit an integrated resource plan, the commission can modify it, and if they don't like the modifications, they can just withdraw, and then the project that we modified is not approved. But they're not forced to do something that they don't agree with, and so it seemed to work there, and that's so we put it in this, and it's something that we've done, like I said, in integrated resource planning for years. The company seems comfortable with it, or at least in that arena has been comfortable with it, so hopefully they will be in this one as well. And before it gets to that, they can ask for reconsideration of a commission order within 10 days of the order being issued, and they can, frankly, in that reconsideration say, you know, we think this one thing went a little too far. If it were here, we'd be comfortable with it, but where it's at, it's not. And we can, if we're comfortable with the midway position they proposed, that in that case, we can accept that and reconsideration. So it does sort of allow for that, maybe not concretely, but it is buried in the process there.
Thank you. And I know the process in order to get it to here, everybody had a chance to look it over. So I was just trying to look at that and make sure, I mean, if they're not objecting and we've got it to here, I didn't see anything in that stuff. But it just seems to me that it's a one-sided negotiation almost, and you know, they got to put in their rate. They have to justify all of the things in order to get their rate and all those things. And there's a bunch of statute on what they're allowed to do and what they're not. And you guys are the check and balance on that. But it just seemed to me that if you say, well, we're going to check, but there's no rebuttal, right? It just seemed funny to me. My second question, a little easier, and again, the section 23. You have a new date talking about May 1st, 2026. Each electric utility shall file with the commission petition joint another electric utility. Is there enough timing on all that stuff? When I looked at it, I think my concern was, is there enough time for them to do all of this stuff? And again, they've got through to here, so apparently they must think they do. It's just, why are we changing the date? What was not working before? Or is it just making your system better by changing it to that date?
Yeah, these regs have been going through the process for quite some time. I think the original date was May 1st of 2024, and we obviously didn't make that. We had changed it to 2026, and the company was comfortable with that. I'm sure they're already working on their list. I believe they plan to try and file an alternate rate-making plan along with their normal GRC later this summer. So they would have to get that list of metrics in place before then, and they seem comfortable with it. But if they're not, they can file a request for deviation. And if they file and say, we're not going to file an alternate rate-making plan until January, so can we have until September or whatever to file the metrics? And of course, we would grant that.
Understood. And I'm not trying to hold up your regulation. It'll go through it. But May 1st is Friday.
Yes, sorry.
I mean,
sorry, Sam Crane.
Hope they have enough time.
I hope so too, sir.
Done because Friday is Friday. So anyway, that was all the questions I had, Madam Chair. If nobody else has any, when you're ready for a motion, let me know.
Thank you, Senator. Is there anyone else in Carson City who has questions for the PUC? Okay, seeing none, I will check down here in Las Vegas. Assemblymember Hafen.
Thank you, Chair. I had the same question as Senator Daly regarding the May 1st, but the deviation answered my question. And I did just want to go on the record to state that I do own and operate a small water company that is regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. However, these regulations are regarding electric utility companies, and so there is no direct or indirect impact on me. So I will be participating on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Daly, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would move to approve R 182-24.
We have a first by Senator Daly. Do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Dondero Loop. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we can move on to regulation R 202-24. Senator Daly, would you like to lead us with questions?
Yes, thank you. Let me get to this section I'm looking for. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And I just, so I'm going to ask again some of the questions, just foundation for me, as I recall some of the things that were changed in the last session, because we brought or changed gas to more parallel what electric does. Because if I recall, and some of the experts can tell me if I'm wrong, the gas company didn't have a requirement to do a general rate change as often, And now they're under a 3-year cycle, as I understand, right? That's part of what was changed in these regulations, kind of parallel what you were doing on the electric side. So tell me if I'm misunderstanding that.
Sam Crano for the record. Yeah, Senator, they weren't actually required to file a general rate case really with any time frame. They had to file a depreciation case every 6 years. And I mean, the best place to do that is in a general rate case. But generally, they took about 5 years or so to do a general rate case. But yeah, and in this last session, SB 442, I believe, also instituted allowed alternate rate making for gas utilities as well. And I will actually next week send the regs over to LCB for pre-adoption review on that. But I have comments due on the 4th on Monday, and after that I'll send them over to LCB for pre-adoption review. But yes, so it sort of brought it more into line with electric, yes.
And thank you for that. And so the question is in section 15, if I'm reading it correctly, it seems like gas is treated differently than electric in that section. It's pretty short. There's a subsection 1 and subsection 2. But it seems to me that gas is treated differently than electric. And I don't understand, I don't know why. I guess I'm asking, what's the justification for that?
Sam Crano for the record, Senator, thank you. Yeah, this is just these regs, the 202-24, R202-24 deal with resource planning for gas utilities. Before that bill and these regs, gas utilities just filed an informational report. It was filed, the dockets opened, accepted the filing, and closed. It was just, here's what we're going to build in the next 3 years. The bill that this responds to in these regs in front of you today institute an integrated resource planning process for gas utilities that's very similar to the electric. And Section 15 here just basically says you can't file an IRP and a GRC at the same time because it just overwhelms staff, the interveners, and I mean, the company doesn't really have the resources to prosecute those two cases parallel. And so it just, file a rate case, file an IRP, just don't do it at the same time is basically all 15 says.
Okay, and again, same thing. These went through the regulatory process. People had time to comment. I'm just trying to make sure I get it. Section 24, we lower the number from 10 million down to 5 million. If I'm thinking of that, there's going to be more projects now that are subject to the major facilities deal. So how many more facility projects do you think will come under this review now by lowering that number? Not that I'm saying it's a bad thing. I just was curious how many more are going to come under the in line with the requirement.
Thank you, Senator Sam Crano, for the record. Quite a few, actually. Gas is, well, it sort of depends on the project. Gas, depending on the size of the pipeline. I just did a gas integrated resource plan, just had the order adopted by the commission 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago today. And so a good number of the projects in there. I mean, the gas, if you get the large pipeline, large diameter pipeline in a populated area, it costs about $1 million a mile to install a new gas pipeline. And so, you know, anything, an extra, instead of being able to go 9 miles without it coming in, now it's 4.5, I guess, that they would be able to go without it coming under that. So quite a few more. I don't have a number that I could give you, but yes, you're correct. Probably quite a few more.
And thank you. And I just was curious. I didn't figure you could give me an exact number or anything like that. And I know, depending on the diameter and where you're at, and putting in a mile of pipeline is expensive. So are you going to get extra review, more eyes on this, and more consumer checks by lowering that number?
For the record, Sam Crano, yes, sir. yeah, like I said, in the case I did, I mean, that went to hearing in February. And we had, the Bureau of Consumer Protection was there. There were interveners in the case. Our staff was in the case. And I had, a team of folks that looked at all of the projects they put forward in great detail. And so, and a number of them were under 10 million, but most of them were over 5. There was one that was 3.5 that they brought in anyway because it was a little sensitive. But yeah, there were more projects. About half the projects in that IRP would not have been there if it was a $10 million threshold instead of 5.
And thank you. And last question, another thing we're not going to solve today. I know it's been an issue, but I don't know if you have any comments. I know there seems to be, it seems gas is different than electric in this way but we have a resource plan and we're going to approve that you can go forward and build out whatever to supply, et cetera. And these larger facilities are going to come under review and you're going to say, yeah, you can go forward, and that's separate from the prudency question when they come back with the rate case and the various things and they say, hey, now we need to get reimbursed for this. And you said we could do it, but you're now going to disallow the expense. And I learned a lot last couple sessions on what goes into that, depreciation, and this should have been already part of your cost, et cetera. It just seems to be an ongoing issue that, in my view, isn't completely resolved and seems to be different than electric.
Thank you, Senator Sam Carino, for the record. It's getting more similar. The gas IRP, they do get some prudency determination in the IRP now that's a thing. Yes, you're right. Back in the day when they were just doing the informational report because it was just a report and there weren't really any processes on it, they didn't get a prudency determination there. And they would have to prove it all in a general rate case. And now in the IRP, they do get some prudency review. In the rate case, when they come back to recover the costs, they have to show that they built it prudently, but the determination to build it was already judged prudent in the IRP. They have to just show that they, met all the requirements, 443 using, prevailing wage, various other requirements, make sure that they didn't get the green light to build it and then just, gold plate the thing. They still have to build it in a prudent manner. And we do that with electric and the GRC as well. While they get the prudency determination in an integrated resource plan, like gas now does, they still have to show that they built the facility prudently in a prudent manner in a rate case in order to recover. So it's more in line now than it was, but it's still a little different, but it's more.
And thank you, because I think the way I understood it, and I talked with both sides, I talked with PUC, I talked with the gas companies and various things, is that it created an unknown, which created a hesitancy to possibly do some upgrades or do some maintenance type of work, because it was unknown whether it was going to get approved on now I'm going to get the return for the investment under the prudency rule under before. So if we're getting closer, that's good. I still don't think it's solved all the way, but that's why I asked the question, and it's not exactly on parallel with electric. And I'll talk with as many people as I can and see if we can get all the way there. So those are my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you. And if you're ready for a motion, let me know.
Thank you, Senator. I'm going to check to see if any of the other members have questions. Is there anyone else in Carson City with questions? Okay, seeing none. Assemblymember Hafen?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the same disclosure again that I do own and operate a regulated utility regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. However, it is water and sewer related, and this regulation is gas related, so I will be participating in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone in Las Vegas have questions? Okay, seeing none, Senator Daley, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve R 202-24.
Do I have a second? I have a second by Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Motion carries. With that, we will move on to our next regulation, which is R 027-25. And I believe that we have the state engineer in Carson City to answer questions. I believe he is on Zoom.
I think they're up here.
Okay, looks like they are in Carson City. Senator Daley, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did call and talk to our LCB a little bit about this regulation. So I think I understand some other stuff. I'm just looking at it when I look at issue a well drilling license by reciprocity. I don't think I've ever seen that in a regulation before. It's generally done by statute. And then there's a lot of things that we look at besides just do they have another license? And I don't want to get reciprocity confused with compacts because that's a whole different issue. But generally, we do want to say, hey, are we going to be put on notice from another state if that person has, complaints against their license within a certain period of time, or we got them licensed here in Nevada and they get a complaint in their other state, are we going to be notified? None of that seems to be in here on that part. And then from what I understand and was told about the state engineer, and maybe our legal counsel can clarify if I say something incorrectly, but said technically, I guess the state engineer is not subject to 233B for the regulatory process. You guys came as a compromise because LCB said, we're not going to do this if you don't do this. So I understand you can go forward with it. I'm just not comfortable doing this by regulation. I think it should be done by statute. I think there should be more parameters around it and all that stuff. But the law does say, and maybe legal counsel will correct me again, law does say is that the state engineer can look at the qualifications of the person in regards to issuing the license. So it's a bit unusual on where we're at. I still don't like to do this by regulation. So I probably won't be supporting this one, Madam Chair, but I'd like to hear what you guys have to say in that regard. And I don't know what my colleagues think, but I think it's got to be done by statute.
My name is Chad Walling, for the record, and I guess to make clear, I'm not the state engineer, but representing the state engineer. That's WALLING. In my position, I did this through the regulation process as a response to the governor's executive order a couple years ago to revise and revisit our regulatory requirements pertaining to licensure. We do have statutory requirements and minimums in there, but we're further directed to work with our advisory board, Well Drillers Advisory Board, to adopt regulations pertaining to qualifications of applicants and the process for obtaining a license. So it was in a combination with and in coordination and communications with the Well Drillers Advisory Board that we came to the language that we presented here. To your concern or question, I guess, whether it's done in statute or regulation is not one that I can answer definitively for you. That's a little bit of the backstory of how we developed this where we are.
And thank you, and I understand, and maybe the state engineer should have been here, but that's neither here nor there, because maybe you can't answer this question. Are you guys opposed to doing it by statute rather than by regulation?
Again, Chad Walling, for the record. Yeah, I think you're correct. That's a better question for the state engineer. In my capacity when I was developing this, I think that the autonomy that it gives us and our staff to work with our applicants that are seeking to obtain licensure We do have checks in here to seek and request information from both the applicant and the other states that they hold active licenses in. Some of those questions about any disciplinary actions or what the status is, what their limitations are, basically to assure that we are not issuing a license through reciprocity that they haven't demonstrated their skills and ability to be able to perform.
And thank you. And you, some of my colleagues have heard me say this before. Maybe you haven't. So I understand the intention that you can ask the questions and those types of things. And you guys are in a unique situation where you don't really need this regulation to do some of this stuff. Although I'm glad that you want it, and I understand the intent and various things. But when it comes down to it, I don't operate off of what the intent is, because anybody can come back to me and say, that's not what the words say. I had this great intent. You can tell me this was the intent. We have this ability, but that's not what the words say. So it's not there. So it's not written down, didn't happen. And I understand about the governor's request to review your regulations. And this isn't the first time I've seen a bad idea come out of that process, but that's nevertheless. Last question, I guess, is, so you went to the advisory board and everything. So is there like some big shortage of well drillers in Nevada that we're unaware of? Is there, things that are not getting done because we don't have licensed well drillers? It would be a new revelation to me. I haven't heard anything about it, but maybe I just haven't heard anything about it.
Thank you again for the question. Chad Walling for the record. That's a hard thing to quantify. I mean, we hear through hearsay. We know that what I hear, the feedback I hear back, our well drillers, well drilling companies are not short on work. They're scheduled pretty far out. So I think there is a high demand. And I think there is interest from our well drilling companies. We've had I don't have exact numbers, but the sense I get is we've had an influx of applicants seeking licensure, testing for licensure, trying to get into the profession. And we hear from a lot of the business owners that good well drillers are hard to retain. So I don't think it's that there's a shortage necessarily, but there is a demand.
And thank you. And another thought occurred to me when we do this by statute. The other thing that we generally would have in there that I don't see here, if we're doing statute, is if we're recognizing them, are they going to recognize us? And I don't see that here, and I don't think it's anticipated. It's a one-way thing. To me, we're going to be importing, workers and companies from other states. And I don't know that should be our first choice in the process. If we have reciprocity to go the other way and drill wells in Utah or Arizona or California, I don't see that here, and I don't know if they have that already. But generally, that recognition goes both ways, and I don't see it. Again, I don't know if you can answer all of that stuff. You didn't say there was a shortage or big demand and all this stuff. There's not a lack of work. People can get licensed. And it seems to me that the next roadblock or hurdle or choke point is going to be getting their contractor's license, and then you're going to want to expedite that. And I don't think that's the right way to go either. It's a higher hurdle, I think, to get your contractor's license and make sure that you have all those qualifications as well. So it's a two-part process. Anyway, I'm not going to support this by regulation. I'm hoping you guys would, withdraw it maybe and try to do some legislation in February.
Thank you, Senator Daly. I do have a couple of questions as well, but I want to go to the members first. Are there any members in Carson City who have questions?
Madam Chair, Senator
Okay,
Titus
Senator
here.
Titus?
Yes,
Dr.
thank you.
Titus?
And thank you for being here. I actually do support it. I think the legislative process can be somewhat cumbersome. And when there's a need, I like the regulatory bodies to be able to have some authority with our oversight, which is why we're here today. My question revolves around the types of drilling operations, and will this affect, because there's different types of wells that are being drilled, from commercial to agriculture to domestic. So does this affect all of those type of well drillers?
Thank you for the question. Again, Chad Walling for the record. When we issue a well drilling license for water production well, we do have, we can implement limitations by types of well or a number of different reasons that we can limit the license. But this is universal across all of for all of our applicants. If there's a limitation, if somebody's seeking reciprocity, and if there's limitations on the state that they're seeking reciprocity from, we would carry those forward.
Great, thank you. And can you tell me what the liability and the responsibility to the citizens or companies that they're drilling for, that's going to remain the same. You have the oversight. So the fact that you're giving license, they're still held to the same standard and same responsibilities, correct?
Yes, absolutely. There's and if I may elaborate on the language here a little bit, is that it's not a simple apply for reciprocity and prove that you have a license and you get it. We've actually used some data to drive we're still going to require those applicants to come and sit for our written examination. So we have a two-part examination, currently a written exam and an oral interview in front of our advisory board. We have raised the minimum passing score for applicants seeking reciprocity from our standard 80% to 87%. And that's because we looked at passing scores of our applicants that went before our advisory board and determined that the applicants that were coming in and scoring above, well above the minimum passing score were largely successful, with maybe one exception in front of our advisory board for applying for their license. So the purpose of this and the intent behind it, the language is that by holding licenses that are similar or comparable to how Nevada issues a license currently in another state, and demonstrating that they know our regulations well enough to score an 87% or higher, which is what our written examination is largely based on, is the regulations, that the state engineer and our advisory board should have a pretty high level of confidence that this person is qualified as a well driller and that they've demonstrated a superior knowledge of our regulations to issue them a license without sitting for an oral interview in front of our board.
Great, thank you. My grandfather and my uncle were the well drillers in Smith Valley for literally decades. And so I'm very familiar with process and well drilling. What kind of numbers, because it's my observation, there is a limited number of drillers out there. People do wait a long time. And in our valley, we've had to drop some wells. Water tables are dropping. What kind of numbers are you looking at as far as availability of well drillers?
So because different well drillers have different specialties, that's hard to say. We currently have somewhere, I don't have the exact number, but there's somewhere around 320 licensed well drillers in the state right now.
Well, I know folks in my area, when they start sucking sand and they need to have a driller drop their well it's been some difficult getting folks. So, and final question, if I might, Madam Chair, just confirming that none of these regulations, we're worried about over allocation of water, all of these things. Nothing in this regulation changes the amount of water that we have supplied. These folks that are drilling these wells have to have, the people have to have appropriate authority to use that water. They have the water rights, and this doesn't change any of the issues with over allocation.
Thank you for the question and the clarification, and that's absolutely correct. This is only touching licensing of a well driller. All of any water right permits, any requests to drill a well, all of those will still follow the channels they always have been.
Great, thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Titus. Is there anyone else in Carson City with questions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, Assemblymember Hanson, please.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to add a little bit of context. I'm a licensed realtor in Nevada, and most of my work is in the Reno-Sparks area. But I also I represent a lot of rural areas in northern Nevada. And just from experience, when you mentioned that you don't know if you could definitively say there is a shortage, but certainly there is a demand, I just want to verify that I've seen that to be true. So when we deal, and we do have a lot of wells in the areas that I represent. A lot are on city, but we do have a lot of the outlying areas where people are on, 5-acre, 10-acre parcels on wells. When I have a real estate transaction, it always will involve a well inspection. And those well drillers, which to my knowledge, there's about 5 in the whole area that I represent in the Reno-Sparks area, Truckee Meadows. And so that is always the very first concern in a transaction with an escrow with a closing date, because if we can't get the well company out to verify and do the inspections, it strings out the transaction. And then they are also doing the work for people in new construction that are building a custom home, things like that require the actual well to be drilled. Because we've had a lot of growth in our area, many people are having to drill deeper in their wells. So I just wanted to put on the record that there is this very strong demand, especially in the Reno-Sparks, northern Nevada area. And so I support the regulation and appreciate you helping us to have an understanding. Thank you, Chair.
Is there anyone else in Carson City? Okay, we'll go to Member Hafen next.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you guys for bringing these regulations. I too appreciate it. I think in the Pahrump Valley, there's about 12,000 wells, and I'm only aware of about 3 well drillers. So definitely a need out here. But I did want to clarify on the 87% versus the 80%. If they apply for we'll call it the expedited process, where they're required to get the 87%. If they don't meet that, can they resubmit under we'll call it the current process that requires the 80%, or would they not be eligible for applying under the current procedures?
Thank you for the question. Chad Walling, again for the record. So the way that we've been implementing this, and we did these as temporary regulations almost a year ago or about a year ago. So we've had some time to adjust to them as well. If an applicant's seeking reciprocity scored above an 80 but less than 87%, they would default back to our standard procedure, and we would still call them for an interview in front of our advisory board. They just wouldn't they wouldn't be eligible for that expedited process. And the other point I'll make on that too is that we're giving them one attempt. So if they, we have applicants that will fail below an 87%, or excuse me, an 80%, and miss the minimum passing score at all. And if they were to come back again and say they scored a 90%, we would still have them go before our board because of that initial attempt did not meet our requirements.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Assemblymember Watts.
Thank you, Chair. And the previous response brought up a question for me. So based on what you said, my understanding now is that this is something that your office has already been doing for a year under temporary regulations. So has there been any change in the number of licensed well drillers, or in the backlog or the time delay that it takes for people to get wells drilled, since it sounds like this is something that the agency has already had implemented for 12 months?
Thank you for the question. There's nothing in these. There's nothing contained in the regulations that that influences the speed on which the current well drillers can operate. So, and truthfully, when a request to drill a well comes before us, we really don't know how long they've been working with their client on their project. So, that's not a question that I can answer for you, unfortunately.
Thank you. And maybe I didn't lay out the question properly, but in trying to understand the justification for this, you discussed essentially the high demand that we're seeing, and that the idea of trying to create this reciprocity through a regulation and not through bringing a statute forward is trying to kind of relieve that pressure and allow more folks to more quickly be able to drill wells in the state, and that will hopefully address the overall demand that can lead to backlogs. So I'm just trying to understand, has there been any significant change or impact as a result of having this temporary regulation in place for the last year?
Thank you for the question. And to date, we have we've had I don't know that the number with me. We've had a number of applicants from other states apply for reciprocity, and we're currently processing our first one that would be eligible. So it was these were concerns that were raised by our advisory board and in some of the drillers in the community and in the industry, that we do not want to just create an opportunity for underqualified drillers, whether they hold a license in another state or not, to get a free pass, so to say, into Nevada. We are in the industry and in the community. We have a pretty established standard of minimum qualifications and licensure process to obtain a license, and we wanted to create this opportunity to give well-qualified drillers from other states an opportunity to get through the process without sacrifice to that standard of qualification that we are known for.
Okay, seeing no other questions from my colleagues, I do have a couple of questions as well. Thank you for being here to answer them, but I want to start first by going over the documentation that you submitted. You had said that this regulation was needed because of the onerous regulatory barriers when it comes to getting a license. Can you walk us through what those onerous barriers are? So if someone from another state wants to come and they have a license in another state and they want to apply for a license in Nevada, what does that onerous process look like?
Thank you for the question. And again, Chad Walling for the record. And to answer that, I would point that these regulations, the only purpose, the reciprocity language, or creating a pathway for reciprocity, is not the only thing that's being addressed with these regulations. So the consideration of what we would consider potentially onerous barriers is more of a revisit and a cleanup of our existing regulations that have been adopted and in place for many years. For example, for a long time, we have required as a pass-fail requirement for a well driller to get their license to identify a point on a map using basically a USGS map. And in our discussions about preparing these regulations and referring to the governor's executive order, we felt that it was an unnecessary barrier to have a well driller identify a point on the map, and if they failed that process, potentially be denied a license to drill well. This has a part to do with advancements in GPS location. You know, if we needed to find where a well application was being submitted for, and we asked for GPS coordinates, that satisfies that same condition that previously we would need to rely on paper maps and locations for. So cleaning up some of that existing language is more about what we were trying to revise, some of these onerous barriers.
Thank you for that answer. And then I want to go not specifically focus on the reciprocity part, because you had mentioned in answering one of the questions that it's a two-part to issue that license reciprocity, but it's really only one part because it's just mandatory written test. Unless they score below that 87%, then it's the oral test as well. So it's not a two-part test automatically for everyone. And I want to touch on the availability of well drillers. You had mentioned that you don't have the number of people who've actually come in and try to apply for a license from out of state, but you had mentioned that in the last 12 months, you guys are in the process of removing your first one. So it doesn't seem like there is a high demand for reciprocity if you guys are just reviewing your very first application. And I tend to agree with my colleague from the north that since there isn't that demand that we need to meet right now, because there isn't a flood of applications coming in for people seeking reciprocity, that this could be a discussion that's had in February during the legislative process. I also had concerns with Section 2, 1B, and this is the question I want you to answer, because you're removing the language that requires that 2 years of experience be in the immediately preceding 5 years. And so if someone wants to come and seek a license for, a reciprocity, and I'm in favor of reciprocity, but I'm in favor of doing it through the legislative process. They could have practiced, 8 years ago. Their 2 years of, experience could be sometime, anytime in the last decade, and they would still be eligible for reciprocity under these regulations. Could you explain why you're just removing that the 2-year experience be within the immediate preceding 5 years?
Thank you for the question. Chad Walling for the record. And one clarification I'd like to make is that we're not now reviewing our first application for reciprocity. We're processing our first applicant that has met the requirements and has, I believe he scored a 90% on our written examination. So we're processing his application to waive that requirement that he appear before the board. We have received, I would estimate, about a dozen applications for reciprocity. Many have scored very poorly on our written examination, well below our minimum passing score of 80%. And so they have not been eligible through that process. To the question about the immediately preceding 5 years of experience, that is not exclusive to reciprocity. That also is applicable for actually it's more applicable for a new applicant seeking licensure for the first time in Nevada. In the language for being eligible for reciprocity, we require that that person for reciprocity hold a current license in the state that they're licensed in for at least 2 years, an active license for 2 years before they'd be able to apply in Nevada. So they're a little bit different processes. So the regulation here in 534-280 is for a new applicant, and there's a couple points to make. One is it felt overly prescriptive to have such a regimented time frame on when that experience could be acquired. And the very next sentence in there still gives the state engineer discretion to determine whether the experience that they're providing to us on their application is satisfactory and appropriate for the license that they're applying. So it felt like it was too prescriptive and too restrictive of our office to look at an applicant's entire history of experience rather than just the last 5 years.
Thank you for that. And I did read that following sentence, but we don't always know who the state engineer is going to be, and giving that discretion to somebody who is an unknown is also concerning. So just to confirm, you said, so in the last 12 months, you've only had 12 applicants and you're processing the only one that met our standards that scored over, I think it was 97% you mentioned. So you're already handing out reciprocity. It's already being done. We've only had one applicant who's eligible. And so I don't see this as something that's very, it's an emergency that would require it to go through legislative commission. I understand removing some of the red tape from the other, from the other regulations for Nevadans who are applying for licensure. So I would just encourage you to maybe come back to the June IFC and bring back those regulations on maybe cleaning up the red tape for licensure here in Nevada, and work on the reciprocity part during the legislative session that's before us in 2027. And members, with that, I'm going to pull this regulation for consideration and ask that the state engineer's office come back in June with regulations. Thank you. Thank you for being here to answer questions. Okay, with that, members, we are going to move on to the next regulation, R050-25. I believe Senator Scheibel pulled that regulation. So Senator Scheibel, as soon as we have the state agency before us, and I believe that's the Commission on Mineral Resources, and it looks like they are getting ready and set up at the table. You can begin with your line of questioning.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here to answer a couple questions. Hopefully this will be quick. It's just like really one question about the confidentiality portion of the proposed changes. I understand moving up the filing date, but I just wasn't sure if the reasoning behind the confidentiality, if you could explain that, please.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Rob Galleri for the record. So the concept behind confidentiality came to us by industry, and the reason behind that is a lot of times this data will be reported into the division, or we're moving this regulation to be same time as the net proceeds reporting. But before it becomes available, they haven't done their annual report as a publicly traded company, and they'd like to have that information on an individual basis held until that April timeframe. The ultimate goal of this regulation is to try to get the information out faster to the public. And so we saw that as a good compromise to where we'd be able to aggregate and provide data of, total the state produced X, Y, and Z, but not at the individual operation level until after April 15th. And that would be after any annual reporting for a publicly traded company.
If I may follow up, that does make sense to me. Is there precedent for that kind of confidentiality that is then lifted, for lack of a better term, other places in either this industry or others?
The only other example I'd be able to point to would be the USGS also has reporting requirements to these companies, and they actually never report it out at the individual company level. It's always done at a national or state level. But besides that, I wouldn't be able to answer anything past that point.
Okay, I think that answers my question. I'm comfortable with the regulation. I was just, because that does explain why those confidentiality provisions are in there.
Does anyone else in Las Vegas have questions? Assemblymember Hafen? Does anyone in Carson City have questions? Okay,
No,
would you like to make a motion, Senator?
No questions up here.
Okay, would you like to make a motion, Senator Scheibel?
Yes, thank you. Motion to approve. Second.
Okay, I have a first by Senator Scheibel, a second by Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you so much for being here. With that, we can move on to our next regulation, which is R083-25. And Senator Don Darrell Loop had that pooled. Senator Dondero Loop. As soon as you are ready, you can go ahead and begin with your question.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just had some questions about the Section 1 that is referenced Chapter 387 of the NAC, and they're amending the new section to read, and then they outline some of the vulnerable and historically underserved populations. And I was curious about first, I was curious about number 8, which was children residing in a household with a parent or guardian who is raising a child or children without a spouse or partner to assist in the upbringing of the child. I feel like that is an assumption that you cannot do this alone. And I would say probably 50% of our parents are alone. And being alone in a household doesn't mean you don't have a father or a mother that is active in that child's life in another location. It also, if you were in the military, you may very well be a single parent a lot of the time. And there have been a lot of famous people with a lot of money who have raised children by themselves. And I know people right here in Las Vegas who have chosen to adopt children as single people, whether they're male or female. So I'm just curious as to why this being single is singled out.
Amelia Table for the record, Nevada Department of Education. I'm joined by my colleague, Director Michael Mitchell in Las Vegas, who I'm hoping will be able to come forward and provide comment.
Yes, Michael Mitchell for the record. Thank you for the question, Senator. So when we went about creating the criteria for this, what it says actually in the NRS is children who are members of vulnerable and historically underserved populations, but without a set definition. There was concern that people would apply that differently throughout the state. Our team goes out and they audit and verify that, and so we don't want to make a decision on the fly of whether we consider that historically underserved or vulnerable populations. I appreciate what you had to say about single parents. I was raised by a single mother. I'm a single dad myself. So I don't think that the intent of this is to single out single parents or to say that those children can't be successful. Similar that we wouldn't say that a child who is in a zip code that only has 1 and 2 star zone schools wouldn't be successful. However, what we did is we reached out to all of the subgrantees within the Nevada Ready Pre-K program to ask them what are the things they would like to see or what they would like to put forward. Those were one of the items. We also know that typically, if you're a single parent, your income is going to be more often than not lower than a 2-parent household, which can either be dual income or just a single high earner. There can also be complexities just in terms of pickup and drop off and how that affects the access of childcare. And so thinking about those situations, which could lead to a place where children might be underserved, and also hearing the feedback of our subgrantees is why that was included in there.
So I'm going to push back just a little bit. And I'm glad you raised the 1 and 2 star schools, because that was another one that I highlighted. Because you're not married, does that mean you're single? I mean, that's the definition. So if someone is living with a spouse, a chosen spouse, but not a legal spouse, then are they single? And once again, unless you're going to identify finances within this, how do you justify saying, because I'm a single parent, I don't have as much money? Because I could be making a lot of money and being a single parent. I mean, like I said, I know I probably could rattle off 10 single parents right now. And every one of them are doing very well. And it's because the parents, even though they are not married, get along very well. And they co-raise this child, maybe not in the same house, but they are doing a very good job of doing that. And maybe, by the way, even better than some people who are married in the same house. We have situations all the time where there is domestic violence in a home of two people and the children are hauled away. That has nothing to do with single and married and everything else. It has to do with who's minding their business, right? So I'm just struggling with the fact that, once again, 50% probably of the people in Nevada or any state could be single, because a lot of people choose to live together now. So they're single by definition of law. And I would also say that while I recognize the 1 and 2 star
Senator John
school,
Darrell-Luke?
yes,
We're going to take a quick pause. It looks like I heard from AVH, it looks like we've lost our Zoom connection.
oh, okay, thank
So,
you.
We will be in a quick recess.
Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Zoom, can you hear me? One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
LV hears you. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Assemblymember Hazen, can you verify that you're here with us?
I am here.
Awesome, thank you so much. Zoom remotes, can you verify for us?
The committee will come back to order. Okay, I just want to say thank you to our fabulous IT team. Just so that everybody knows, this was actually a Zoom software failure, and our fabulous IT team did a great job of navigating around that, and they are working on getting us back to the full capabilities of that Zoom. But right now we do have Assemblymember Haven just on audio. And for those who are listening, when we get to the end of the meeting, we are going to take public testimony in person in Las Vegas and in Carson City. But if Zoom is not back up, then we will not be able to take testimony via the phone. So you are more than welcome to submit your written testimony to the committee staff for inclusion. If we are fully back up and running, then we will take phone testimony. But with that, I am going to pick up where we left off on regulation R083-25, and I'm going to come back to Senator Dondero Loop so she can finish her questioning. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me a second round. So I guess that when I think about some of these criteria, I don't necessarily see anything financial. And also, when does a parent become a single parent, right? I can start out as a married parent, become a single parent, or vice versa. So I guess I'm just struggling with some of the criteria, because if we're wanting our underserved populations to actually be in pre-K, yes, does a homeless assistance team provide that, yes, I would say that that would be, but there are other things in here that I'm not sure that, I just feel like we need to define the criteria a little bit to make sure we capture all those kids, and make sure that we do the right thing, because we do want, I personally was a kindergarten teacher for 10 years, so I know how important this is. And so I guess I'm just struggling with, it's not exactly where I feel like it should be. And so I was wondering if you could just talk about that a little bit. And by the way, are we able to adjust some of this and have more discussion?
Amelia Table for the record, Nevada Department of Education. I'll just begin with a few quick points before I turn it over to Director Mitchell. The first, regarding the single parent, I think the wording here in Section 8 is very careful. Residing in a household with a parent or guardian who is raising a child or children without a spouse or partner to assist in the upbringing of the child. This does not necessarily predicate that the partner or spouse to assist in the upbringing of the child would reside in the same home. So if there were another parent, if there were community supports who were providing other supports to that parent or guardian, that would qualify as a parent or guardian who is receiving support in assisting the upbringing of the child. I think I would also draw attention to having to define the term vulnerable and historically underserved populations. The provisions under Nevada Ready Pre-K do have other financial provisions that are specifically outlined in terms of how we go about prioritizing those funds. But the term vulnerable and historically underserved populations was added towards the end of that list and was slightly more open. I do believe that some of the pieces of information that have arrived on this list, especially during the process of stakeholder engagement, is to capture vulnerable and underserved populations, but to also look at what has been deemed as historically underserved. So that is not always going to be the right now, but we do know that many of the kind of groups or children that are presently listed in the regulation have been historically underserved. And so we do have to take into consideration not just those children that might be vulnerable or underserved in the present circumstance or in our present systems, but to also accommodate that the language is specific in historically underserved, and that does tend to be a bit more expansive, particularly around the idea of single parents or parents who might not have community assistance or partnership, or even other parents who may reside outside of the household but are still providing that partnership in raising the child. To that, I would then turn it over to Director Mitchell for additional comments.
Michael Mitchell for the record, and thank you for the opportunity to further answer this question. So going back to what Amelia said, there's 4 eligibility criteria for Nevada Ready Pre-K. The criteria you have today are just to define the 4th criteria. So the first criteria is children who are 4 years of age, whose household has a household income which is not more than 250% of the federally designated level, signifying poverty. So that's the first criteria we look at. Second, who have an individualized educational program. Third, whose primary language is not English. And then 4th, who are members of vulnerable and historically underserved populations. So these regulations will only define that 4th regulation. It won't impact 1 through 3. So the first eligibility criteria will still be income. I think it's also important to point out that we at the Office of Early Learning and Development work with our subgrantees, and part of that expectation, that work, is that they are also serving children by need. And so even the income qualification used to be 200%, it moved to 250%. But if you have, 10 spots and you have a child at 40% the poverty, 100% the poverty line, we want that child served before 249% of the poverty line because of that established need. And so those processes won't change, and those initial criteria won't change. Those children will also be prioritized in that process. Just echoing what Amelia said about the language, it specifically doesn't say single parent for a reason, but tries to qualify that. At our centers, at pre-K centers, at our community-based organizations, we will get the family information for pickup. Community-based organizations must scan the ID of those people that pick up. So we're going to be aware if there's two people residing in the home. And I think it's also important to point out that for childcare subsidy in our state, a parent would have to have a max income of $33,072. For Nevada Ready Pre-K, a single parent with one child, the max income would be $52,875. My child's program is $305 per week, and so if she's in pre-K now, and she institution, that is going to cost a family over $15,000 a year, if they're staying full time. And so when we're thinking about these parents, we're thinking about that parent making $53,000, $58,000, $62,000 that doesn't qualify for NRPK based on that 250% poverty line, but still putting 20-30% of their income would be a big barrier to them and their family. Just to give some further information, the Children's Cabinet released their Early Education and Care Fact Sheet for 2025. I'm just going to read from this fact sheet. So they marked for our state, the median family income for married couple families is $112,561. For a male head of household with no spouse present, $64,942. For a female head of household, no spouse present, $39,499. The cost of licensed childcare as a percent of median income for all families in the state is 10.68%. For married couples, that drops to 8.62%. For a male head of household, that increases to 16.35%. And for female head of households, 24.96%. And so I can understand, there may be a concern, hey, are we prioritizing the students with the highest need? But our processes and our work with subgrantees will do that, because a child who's in poverty, a child with an IEP is going to be receiving priority enrollment over, say, a single parent who is a high income earner. But we do see differences in the state based on home composition, household composition, and salary, and how much of that has to go to pay for pre-K or otherwise childcare. I'm not sure if I answered you fully, but if there's any further questions, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, Michael Mitchell for the record. Also, if I could just say one more thing. So in 2024, NRPK served 3,472 students. That number has increased every year since then. So this upcoming school year, we're going to allocate, or we have allocated 8,500, and I believe 8,532, I believe is the number. 8,537 is the number. And so also, when we had 3,472 kids, 200% was the criteria. There was no other criteria. This is the first year there's an expanded criteria where those numbers 2, 3, and 4 are included. And it's not only income-based, but income-based is still the first criteria. And with those growth of seats, we feel very confident that we're still able to serve kids at the highest need, but also expand out the criteria to ensure that those seats are fully enrolled.
Thank you. And Director Mitchell, I just want to confirm, you just repeated it again, but I just want to confirm that this is already in regulation. The first eligibility requirement is income. And then after income, then you go to 2, 3, and this would be
4.
new 4.
Yes. And this number 4 is in regulation as historically underserved and vulnerable populations, but there's no definition of what that means.
Okay.
And so we are using these criteria to define that instead of letting each subgrantee define it for themselves. And then we determine if that was actually an eligible child. So if you consider something like income, it's very easy to establish eligibility. We look at the tax forms, we see if it's under that 250% of the poverty line, but without a definition here, it would be very difficult.
Okay, so again, just to confirm, and income's already in regulation, so it's income, and then you
Yes.
go to 2, 3, 4.
Yes.
And underserved or vulnerable and historically underserved population is already in regulation with no definition, and every grantee is defining it on their own how they want to define it. And this is just going to make it clear. Okay.
Yes.
Committee members, does anyone else have any questions? Let's go to Carson City. Does anyone in Carson City have any questions? Okay, Assemblymember Hafen, I know we can't see you, but we can hear you. Do you have any questions?
No, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I'd be looking for a motion. I have a motion from Speaker Yeager. Do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay? Okay, motion carries. Thank you for being here and for your patience during our technical difficulties. Thank you. With that, members, it takes us to our last regulation for review. We have R084-25 that was pulled by Senator Daley, and I believe the superintendent's office should be here ready to answer questions, and I see that they are already at the table. So Senator Daley, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have several questions on this proposal, if you will. So when I'm looking at Section 7, subsection 2, when it talks about the appointments of the people to this, to the board, so it sounds to me like you guys are giving orders to the appointing parties on what their criteria has to be, and none of that is supported in the actual statute. So are these suggestions or are they orders? And if they don't follow your suggestion, do you reject their appointment, or are the people allowed to appoint who they would like? Because there's nothing in the statute that requires any preference on anybody.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Steve Canavero, the Director for the Education Service Center. Thank you for the question. It's a preference. There's no ability of the regulation to direct an appointing authority specific to a certain skill set. These are preferences, and in Section 56.5, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, one of the things that they can consider is some of the qualifications for the board. So we just held it at a preference, thinking through what the ideal composition of the board would be, making those recommendations or preferences communicated to the appointing authority, and then the appointing authority would take those into consideration when they made their appointments. Just a preference, not an order in any way, sir.
And that's where I'm saying, and you understand statutory construction, at least I do, you have ands and ors and various things, and you have may and shall, must, and it says that the governor shall give preference to the people that you're offering. And it also says the same thing on the people that are appointed in the statute, I think B through E. So you have majority leader, minority leader in the Senate, speaker and minority leader in the Assembly. The only one I think you have purview over to say is the one that the appointment from the public education folks. So when you use the word shall, and I hear your words here, but that's not what the statute says. It says that they shall give this preference.
Steve Canavero, I can say as it's been implemented, there's been, I think the appointing authorities have given consideration or preference to certain candidates, but so far we have 6 of the 7 members appointed, and that has gone without any, we haven't weighed in, at least I have never weighed in to say that this particular preference wasn't met with this candidate. We just have accepted the appointments.
Understood, but again, intentions versus what the words actually say, right? What do the words actually say? It says you shall give preference, which means to me that at some point you would be able to say, hey, they don't meet this criteria. So when we get further down in, to me, it seems like it would set up a barrier or a process where an otherwise qualified principal or teacher that were at a level 3, 2, or 1 school, not even that's a requirement that they be a teacher or a principal in the statute, but hopefully you're going to people with expertise. But it leads to me is that it's almost like we're setting this up. People are going to read these. They're going to think it says that they have to, and these are my qualifications. And if you're a principal or a teacher at a level, at a lower level than the 2 highest tiers, the way this reads is they're not eligible. And you said you wouldn't reject if they didn't follow your criteria. So I'm saying, why are you even putting it in there?
Steve Canavero, a great question. When we did the research, or at least when I looked at the 40 other states who have these intermediates, like the Education Service Center is in Nevada, sits between the state and the school districts to provide service and support to the districts. There was sort of a theme around the types of capacity that the boards held, and that we wanted to have that capacity, that experience here in Nevada. So that's the rationale behind requesting appointing authorities review these capacity, the skill sets and capacities that individuals have as a preference, not as a requirement, in making their appointments. Thus far, it's worked out fantastic. The 6 members of the board who have been appointed thus far bring unique skill sets to the board, including finance, district operations, high school principal, K-8 principal. So I think, from my perspective, again, I don't have any authority to reject an appointment, but from my perspective, as the appointments have come through, it seems like appointing authorities are very considered when they work through who they select for this body.
And thank you. So then I guess when if we can get past the Section 7 issue, when we get down to the Section 8, if there's a vacancy that occurs, somebody's going to be putting a list of recommendations forward, and I'm sure you're going to use this criteria on what your preference is, and you're going to exclude, we could use the word discriminate against other qualified people at lower level schools, because you're going to say, hey, we're going to give you 2 names, a list that's prepared. You say not less than 2. I think it should be a higher number, maybe not less than 4 or something like that. But when you're making that list, you're going to follow your preference, and you're only going to give them names. And in my view, it's discriminating against otherwise qualified people at lower level schools when the statute, again, does not support any such preference. And when you use the word shall, it still means that you shall do it, unless you've got a different definition of shall. And in statutory construction, even though there's just a regulation, no longer applies to the word shall. I'm not seeing how you get around that they have to do it. And you're telling me this here today, and it's going to be on the record, and we can go back and look at the history of what we're talking about, but that would not prohibit a future administrator or person in your position from saying, look, I interpret it differently. I know what my predecessor said, but it says I'm gonna reject you because it says right here that you shall give this preference, and you didn't do it. So I'm not accepting your nomination. You say I don't have authority to do that. I agree. You don't have authority to tell them what the preference is in the first place.
Steve Canavero.
If we put it in regulation, then we're sanctioning that. And I don't think we should.
Thank you, sir. Steve Canavero, just in response. So I believe that the superintendent of public instruction, in constructing a list, if there's a vacancy, would likely look at the composition of the board and make recommendations to the appointing authority around a particular skill set or experience that would add or contribute to the board's ability to be responsive to district and charter school needs. Now, again, that list, just like the preferences, is non-binding. If an appointing authority ultimately has the authority to choose their appointment, this is just an attempt to try to round out a skill set that we think, based upon experience and based upon looking at others across the country, would bring actionable, relevant skills to the board. But again, preference, not necessarily a requirement. I think we started with the requirement, and LCB said you can't do that. So the preference language came out of that discussion.
LCB should have left out the shall part and said, "Hey, we're recommending this preference would have been better than you shall use this preference." And I understand. So tell me then, what is the measurable skill that a higher level principal or teacher has who happens to be in maybe a better neighborhood, a better area of town, more involved parents than a principal or a teacher at a level 3, 2, or 1 school? What skills does the one over here have that these principals in the other schools don't have?
Steve Canavero. So one of the things that the idea behind identifying a teacher or principal educator who's led a high-performing school is to sit on the board. One of the aspects or one of the required services and supports that the Education Service Center would provide is, in fact, improving student outcomes. So if you read through sort of the list, there's some finance, some efficiency work, and improving student outcomes. And so having the experience of someone, ideally somebody who has grown a school over time from increased performance, would bring a bit of the boots on the ground to the Education Service Center board. So as we're designing services and support that are responsive to district need and school need, that we have that voice in the room.
See, and I guess I would just disagree with the premise, right? And I've had these discussions over many years in the legislature. I'm not as an expert as some other people on our committee today on that, but you can make the argument, and it's a subjective measurement. You can have a teacher at a higher performing school, like I said, more involved parents, more affluent area of town, that brings a student from a C to a B, right? And that, look at that success. Isn't that great? You're going to have, I think, oftentimes a better teacher or a better principal at a lower performing school with more issues to overcome, language barriers, various things, that got a student just to pass. That was a harder lift, and that was more effort, and that's the teacher and expertise that we might want to have on this board. So I just think that it's a false measurement that you're having on these stars in the schools. And I don't agree with the whole premise that just because there's this outcome at this school that the person at a lower performing school wasn't doing just as much work, in fact, maybe even more, and that achievement just wasn't recognized or measured fairly.
Steve Canavero, just in a quick response, I don't think we're totally disagreeing. In a collaborative scenario, an appointing authority could reach out and say, "Hey, this is what I'm really interested in bringing to the board. I've seen this particular school within my district move from 2 stars to 4 stars, or from 1 to 3 stars. What do you think about that?" I think having somebody who moved from 1 to 3 stars in 3 years, or 2 to 4 stars in 3 years, would be an ideal person ideal experience to bring to the board and to support the Education Service Center. So again, would love to have a collaborative discussion with an appointing authority, but again, as it's written, these preferences, they wouldn't require an appointing authority to take a particular stance. It's just a view of a rounded out set of experiences that the Education Service Center board could strive for.
And I hear you, and you're saying that it's a preference, a recommended preference, but it does slant everything in a certain direction instead of looking at the full range, in my view. So, I don't like the way 7 is written with the word shall. I don't like we're going to use this preference likely in the recommendation. I think 2 is too few. So I don't know how we get past those two things today. My last question, if I can, Madam Chair, moving on. I'd like to look at Section 10, and I have a couple of questions there, where within the limits of available funds, the executive director may employ such employees and hire such independent contractors as deemed necessary to carry out the duties. And I have a problem. There's lack of pre-qualifying on the independent contractor part. Because when I go through and I tried to be as thorough as I could and read as much stuff as I could. So in SB 460, Section 56.5, sub 6B, it says that the staff, right in the statute, that the staff of these agency are eligible for public employee benefits, PERS and PEB, and all of that stuff. Where independent contractors would not be eligible for that. And then it also goes down to the section on Section 11, and it refers to the hiring practices under NRS 333, where they're talking about independent contractors, but I believe those statutes primarily apply to professional employees. I understand hiring lawyers and accountants as professional employees. So I think in that Section 10 there, employees and hire such professional employees as independent contractors has to be there. Without that, I think it's ambiguous. I think they could hire just about anybody they wanted to as an independent contractor. And I think it would conflict with that they're eligible for PERS and the rest of it. And it's just not the employment practices that I've ever supported in any legislation. I'm always wary of the use of the term independent contractor without some qualification on it, that you're talking about professionals, which doesn't exist here, which creates another problem for me.
Steve Cambero, let me take each of those one at a time and talk about the intent. So the Education Service Center is brand new. You created it. We're building it right now. It's currently being incubated, housed in the governor's office, principally because that's the only really flexible spot within state government. I can't hire full-time staff members. I have to obviously build a budget and come to you in 27 to do that. So one of the ways of building capacity, and it's consistent with the Nevada Department of Education and others, and bringing in the services that are necessary, is through a temporary temp agency, which is what independent contractors is referencing. So it's us trying to be nimble, trying to be responsive, but also within the limits of how the state operates. So we might bring in an hourly employee to help on reporting burden efforts when we're trying to streamline reporting. That's a 6 to 9 month engagement, but I could do that under the terms of this particular piece of regulation. The professional services is very similar, just ensuring, in some cases, I didn't know how to respond to needs that were raised. I did a full statewide tour in December and January, met with every superintendent in their office across the state, and most often their cabinet members, if they had some, and their members of their, at least 1 or 2 members of their trustees, and essentially asked three main things. First one was just talking about the Education Service Center. It's a new thing, making sure everybody understood what this entity was. The second, what their needs were. And then the third, if we had time, we talked about aspirational needs. So in some cases, we have school districts who are struggling to find specialized staff. School psychologists for students with disabilities is probably one of those that came up the most, especially along the 80 corridor. And the Education Service Center could play a role. and many of the superintendents would say, well, it'd be great if the Education Service Center could actually hire a school psych. We could all chip in, and if I knew that the second Tuesday of each month, I have one full day with the school psych here, we'll be fully prepared for that. But it enabled them to bring sort of the costs down, but the services would still remain. And so the professional services exemption, and again, it refers to within the constraints of the statute and regulation, but it also refers to the administrator and having a conversation with the administrator to see, well, geez, how can we bring on a school psychologist? Perhaps they could qualify for professional services exemption. I mean, we would just delay, I think, the inevitable if I was to go to bid for a school psychologist that could travel the Highway 80 corridors, familiar with every district from Humboldt to Elko, and could be there once a week for over the course of a month. It would just delay the timeline, probably find that same person. But here we're just looking at ways that we can maximize flexibility within the confines of the law to ensure that we can stand up the center and offer direct services and supports to the needs that the districts have. So maybe that's helpful, or maybe it's not, but that's sort of the explanation where we are.
And thank you. And like I said, I don't have a problem applying that to professional services or, psychologists and those types of things. When you mentioned, employment agencies, that's where I got the concern is, if you're looking at, well, I can just contract out and get this employment agency versus hire a person, FTE on the payroll and various things. I don't know if it compares apple to apple. We would want you to hire, and I think it was contemplated in legislation that says they're eligible for the state employee benefits, that you would be hiring people and not temporary agencies. Professionals, I understand that. There's an exemption in the law for that already, rightfully so. So you can have that flexibility. But I don't think it was qualified very well. And it's unclear that it's supposed to apply only to professionals. I don't know if you got any response or not, but.
I apologize, sir. Do you mind repeating the question?
I'm just saying that the words don't match what you say your intent is. I understand the public employee or the professionals being hired, but you also mentioned hiring people through temporary agencies, and those are not professionals, and that's where I think the rub comes, and I think conflicts, at least with the statute.
Thank you, Steve Cambro. Just again, because we're in the interim, I have no choice. If I were to hire, because I don't have a PCN that's approved by the legislature to staff an individual, hiring a full-time individual, and it's within the limits of available funding. So if I have $35,000 or $40,000 to support, and I think the reporting burden is a perfect project to outline, don't currently have enough to support a full-time employee for that particular project, but we know we have work to do in the next 6 to 7 months to support like a longstanding project that the state's been engaged in to reduce the administrative overburden by duplicative reports, and so in order to bring that support or capacity in, hiring an independent contractor, again like a temp employee, is the way through to ultimately build a budget, present it to you in 2027 that then has the positions. The intention is not to rely upon a set of independent contractors. The intent of the center is to hire capacity, have full-time employees that are delivering needed and necessary service and support to the districts. So that's the intention. It's just getting from here to there, but ultimately it will be a conversation in 2027, or the legislative session, to your point, in February.
And thank you for that explanation. So, I mean, translate, at least from my point of view on what you're saying. We're in the interim. We may not have money for a full-time employee, so we want to put language in a regulation that is not temporary, that's permanent. It's going to be there, and unless the executive agency, the branch, decides to change it later, our only recourse would be to try to pass a law to change it, right? So you didn't come and say, hey, I just need to do this until I can bring a budget next time. Those words that we approve are going to be in there, and you're going to be able to hire independent contractors for whatever position you want under this regulation as written. And so you understand why when we let it go from here, now it's in your arena. When it comes back to us, entirely up to the executive branch. The only thing the legislature can do would be to try to pass a law to change it. But if the executive branch is happy with the regulation and they're going along that, it's not that easy to pass a statute, right? Which is why I scrutinize and agonize over these regulations before I let them go when it has some language like this that's unclear, is uncertain, is not temporary, that allows you to do something I fundamentally disagree with. Maybe I could live with it short term till you get stood up and you come back in your budget next year, but you're not telling me that I guarantee you I'm going to come and change this regulation after that next budget. You may not even be in that position next time. And that's the risk we're taking if we allow this to go forward.
Steve Gambaro. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm trying to appreciate the needs that come over the bow that I'm hearing from our districts and how to staff those needs. And I don't know that I could say it is 100% the intention to staff the ESC with full-time folks. I think it 100% should be a public entity, needs to remain that way. We're working with the RPDPs to ensure that we're efficient, we're coherent, and we're have one particular collected voice of support for our districts and our superintendents. And I also could see the need for temporary support for a very short-term project that the districts might raise that I wouldn't want to foreclose on. And I don't want to mislead you, sir, by saying like, oh, this is just temporary. That having that option is kind of important in order to be flexible, in order to be responsive. And, if we can fill that role and have funding with the full-time, then that's the direction we would go, especially if they're, skilled and nimble in what they can do. But there are cases, and I could see it with the reporting burden project. I can even see it on like the fiscal work that we're trying to do, where we might need someone over the course of just a few months to help stand up an infrastructure, let's say whether it's online or it's reporting or it's some infrastructure that then they can hand over to the team at the ESC to then to implement. So I want to make sure like that I'm clear with what I think the ESC needs going forward and how I think this language would support it.
Thank you. I'm hearing you. I'm still uncomfortable with it. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And then once it's passed here, those are the words, and that's the standard. And it goes against something I try to protect against in the independent contractors side of the equation, and then you have the other shall and all the other stuff in the criteria that I think are too narrow. Obviously, the political appointees can do what they want, but they're going to only hear from people that are at these higher level schools. And we talked about that. So I don't think I can support the regulation as written, Madam Chair. So that's all the questions I have now.
Thank you, Senator. Is there anyone else in Carson City who has questions?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Assembly Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. I wanted to go back to some of the concerns my colleague raised in reference to Section 7, particularly B, and I think it was D. In regards to a person who has served as a principal of a school in a school district or a charter school, attained highest or second highest ratings, the fear that there would be maybe discrimination, I want to say that I don't have that concern as I read this, because as I'm familiar with the data of the performance of a lot of the schools in the state, I think it's important that we realize that yes, there are underserved communities, there are schools where they're a Title I school, maybe there's not a lot of parental involvement, but that does not necessarily mean those schools aren't high performing. In fact, in the state of Nevada, what makes me excited about this regulation is the opportunity to have people from these high performing schools. For instance, in Clark County, there's at least 5 of them that have achieved that top tier Title I performers in Clark County, and 2 of those got national distinction. So lack of income of parents and lack of parental involvement is not necessarily, we know there is some impact, but it doesn't necessarily tie the destiny of a school to be a failing school. And fortunately, we have some great examples that I'm so proud of in the state of Nevada, particularly in Clark County. With that being said, I think the model that it's just common sense, whether we have our own business, whether we serve as a teacher in a school, whatever the profession is, we want to learn from the best. So that would mean that we need the best to be a part of the process, or at least those who are having some success. And I think because we have some of these great performing Title I schools, we have the opportunity to have feedback from schools that do deal with issues that maybe schools in another part of the city or the state might not. So I feel confident in the way the regulation has been proposed. I understand shall in the sense that we have to give direction, but I am very comfortable with the word preference and understand requirement was not necessarily advised to be used. So thank you for bringing this. I just wanted to get that on the record that when we talk and worry about doing performance-based as a selection, I don't see it as discrimination, because we do have some really great high-performing schools that fall in the Title I category. Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Is there anyone else in Carson City who would like to ask questions? Okay, seeing none, Member Hafen?
None, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, anyone in Las Vegas? Okay, with that, I would be looking for a motion to approve the regulation. I have a first from Speaker Yeager, a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay. We have Senator Daley as a nay. Motion carries. Okay, with that, committee members, that concludes agenda item number 4, review of regulations. We can go ahead and move on to item number 5. Item number 5 does have 2 parts to it. The first part is a summary of audit reports presented by the Legislative Commission's Audit Subcommittee. That was presented to the Legislative Commission's Audit Subcommittee on April 15th. We have with us today, I believe in Carson City, Daniel Crossman, our legislative auditor, to present the summary of audit reports. And following the presentation of the audit reports, we will move into part 2, which is a summary of the 6-month status of reports on the implementation of audit recommendations. With that, I will turn it over to our auditor, Mr. Crossman, to begin part 1.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, members of the Legislative Commission. For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. Under Agenda Item 5A today, you'll see a letter from Assemblymember Backus, Chair of the Audit Subcommittee, indicating that on April 15th of 2026, a meeting of the Audit Subcommittee of the Legislative Commission was held, in which 5 audit reports were presented and accepted by the subcommittee. 3 of these reports are multi-agency reports and include audit work and recommendations for 10 different agencies. Following the subcommittee meeting, all legislators were notified of the release of these reports via email with links to the reports on our website. During the audit subcommittee meeting a couple weeks ago, we presented a summary of the key findings in the reports to the subcommittee, answered various questions from the committee members, and engaged in some robust conversation. Representatives from the agencies and school districts also provided remarks and answered various questions as well. Today, I'll briefly summarize the key findings from those reports. Please note that the audit reports, the full reports, are available on our website, where many more details can be obtained on our findings and our recommendations. Additionally, if members of the committee are interested in discussing any of these reports in detail, we'd be happy to find time to do that. We're also available to present any of these reports to any interim committee. Turning to the next page in the packet is a summary of the audit titled Multi-Agency Information Security, Division of Public and Behavioral Health, Office of the Secretary of State, Cannabis Compliance Board, and Employment Security Division. This multi-agency audit was initiated in an effort to provide multiple agencies with an assessment of some key IT controls, all wrapped up into one audit process. The audit's objective was to determine if the agencies had adequate information security controls in place over information security risk assessments, asset inventory management, vulnerability management, and security awareness training to ensure the protection of information technology systems and the data those systems process, store, and transmit. In summary, we found opportunities for improvement across all 4 of the agencies included in our work. The classifications of findings ranged from needs minor improvement to needs significant improvement. Various details on the conclusions reached are detailed in our report. And I will note that none of our findings rose to the level of a significant security vulnerability that would prevent us from including that information in our audit report. In all, we made a total of 27 recommendations in this report to the 4 agencies, all of which were accepted to help improve information security in the state. On the next page is the summary for the audit, Compliance with Annual Report of Accountability, Clark County School District, Washoe County School District, and the State Public Charter School Authority. This is the first in a series of audits required of the Legislative Auditor by Assembly Bill 517 from the 2023 session. The bill includes various objectives. The purpose of this audit was to determine if Clark County, Washoe County, and the State Public Charter School Authority complied with statutory requirements concerning the annual report of accountability and utilized consistent methodologies for such reporting. We found that the Clark County and Washoe County School Districts and the State Public Charter School Authority, jointly I'll refer to them all as the districts, substantially complied with statutory reporting requirements for the annual report of accountability, providing most accountability metrics required by statutes. For accountability metrics within their control, the districts achieved a reporting compliance rate of 93%. And just to clarify, this percentage is of the required metrics that were reported. This is not an assessment of the accuracy of each item reported. We found some accountability data metrics were not reported due to factors outside of the district's control, such as data that is reported by the Nevada Department of Education, or NDE, or a lack of prescribed instructions from NDE. Required accountability information gives lawmakers and citizens valuable insight into the performance of Nevada's education system. Greater collaboration between the school districts, NDE, and the legislature would help ensure necessary accountability information is captured and reported. Next, the districts generally used comparable methodologies to collect and compute accountability data. To help ensure consistent methodologies are used by school districts, NDE prescribes instructions for each sub-report on what data should be collected and how to compute different metrics. However, despite this statewide direction, We identified methodology inconsistencies for 3 accountability sub-reports tested. Furthermore, SPCSA relies on each charter school to compile the reported data. Ensuring consistent methodologies are used between districts allows decision makers to receive reliable and comparable accountability data. The districts have established various controls to help ensure accurate and reliable information is reported. For example, the districts have created units and procedures to collect, validate, and report accountability data. However, we observed areas where controls over accountability data reported can be strengthened. Specifically, SPCSA can improve additional oversight of its sponsored charter school level accountability data. In addition, accountability data being reported by certain Clark County School District entities lacked adequate controls, and the Washoe County School District can improve controls over its final reported data to ensure errors are found before submission to NDE. Controls over the collection and compilation of accountability data help ensure consistent methodologies are used and decision makers receive reliable and comparable accountability data. We made 6 recommendations to the Clark County School District, 6 recommendations to the Washoe County School District, and 5 recommendations to the State Public Charter School Authority. All recommendations were accepted by those entities. On the next page is the summary of the audit titled Response to the Opioid Epidemic, Funds and Activities, Division of Public and Behavioral Health, Attorney General's Office, and Department of Human Services. The purpose of this audit was to determine if state agencies are adequately overseeing opioid epidemic response funding, opioid litigation recovery, treatment providers, and statewide planning. This is the first of what we expect to be 2 audit reports that we will issue out of my office on this topic. In summary, in this report, we found the following by agency. For the Division of Public and Behavioral Health, we found they play an important role in the fight against opioid use disorder. From 2018 to 2023, over $115 million in federal funds were overseen by DPBH to help counter the opioid epidemic in Nevada. We found DPBH can improve its oversight of provider activities and payments. In addition, DPBH's oversight of infant care plan preparation and administration was lacking for opioid-exposed infants. Furthermore, DPBH can enhance its oversight of statewide planning and grant preparation support activities. Improved DPBH oversight of funding, planning, and treatment providers will enhance statewide activities designed to reduce the opioid epidemic's impact on Nevada citizens. We issued 16 audit recommendations to DPBH. Next, for the Attorney General's Office, allocations of settlement funds to the state and local governments were accurate. However, the office can improve its oversight of opioid litigation costs and contractual amendments. The office did not identify excess interest charges to the state, and some inaccuracies occurred in interest calculations. After we notified the office regarding these errors in interest calculations, the office worked with the law firm to correct the interest charges. Additionally, invoiced costs were approved for reimbursement even though some costs were unallowable or invoices were incomplete. Proper oversight and review of costs help ensure that the Attorney General's Office is appropriately and effectively overseeing litigation expenses. We issued 5 recommendations to the Attorney General's Office. Next and last in this area, in this report, is the Department of Human Services. We found the department can improve its monitoring of entities receiving opioid litigation settlement funding and its review of annual program reporting. Specifically, DHS can improve the quality of certain Fund for Resilient Nevada agreements to ensure fund recipients receive adequate oversight and provide sufficient reporting. In addition, DHS did not conduct regular site visits for some funding recipients. Insufficient oversight increases the risk funding will not be used effectively or in alignment with program goals. Finally, a public report submitted to the state leadership contains some errors in the Fund for Resilient Nevada expenditures that support the opioid epidemic mitigation efforts. We made 3 recommendations to the Department of Human Services. In all, we made 24 recommendations to improve DPBH's management of grants and other statewide efforts related to the opioid epidemic response, the Attorney General's Office's oversight of opioid litigation costs and contracting, and the Department of Human Services' oversight of entities spending opioid settlement funds. The agencies accepted all 24 of these recommendations. On the next page is a summary for our report of government and private facilities for children, inspections, December 2025. This year's report includes the results of 25 children's facilities we inspected. We had notable findings at 9 of these facilities. In each of these, we identified certain health, safety, and/or welfare issues and contacted the respective licensing agency to share the concerns we had. The various concerns are noted in much more detail in the report by facility. One of our notable observations in our inspections was a loaded firearm in a facility in an area accessible to children in a foster care agency in Clark County. Our staff requested and observed the gun be unloaded and secured in our presence. We promptly notified Clark County Family Services and agency management about our observations and concerns. The employee was subsequently terminated from employment. Across the facilities inspected, we also identified some additional concerns that fell under the following categories: notification to physician for medication refusals, fire safety, person legally responsible for consent documents, denial of rights reporting, fingerprint submission documentation, abuse or neglect mandatory reporting requirements, and completion of medication administration records in real time. As a result of our reviews and based on the licensing agency's actions, various forms of corrective actions were taken for the facilities and homes we inspected to ensure that the standards of care were being met for the children. Through our continued work in this area, we will monitor and follow up with the facilities and their licensing agencies where we have ongoing concerns. The audit subcommittee requested that we provide additional updates to them on facilities we have recently reviewed at subsequent audit subcommittee meetings. There are various other details in our reports on the deficiencies that we did note. We also include at the end of that report a couple of recommendations for legislative consideration to formalize the complaint reporting requirements and process and to enhance training. As I mentioned earlier, we are available anytime to meet and discuss any of these reports in any detail with legislators or committees. For these agencies, the 60-day plan of corrective action is due on July 11th, which we will then review. The 6-month reports on the implementation status of recommendations are due in January of 2027. These 6-month reports, which I will talk about in a minute on the next agenda item for other reports previously released, those will be prepared in part by the Governor's Finance Office, Internal Audit Division, and some by the audited agencies, all of which are reviewed by the Legislative Auditor's Office to assess the implementation status of recommendations, and will be presented at later dates to the Audit Subcommittee and Legislative Commission. Chair, that concludes my presentation on the audit reports that were accepted by the Audit Subcommittee on April 15th of this year. And as noted in the cover letter, the subcommittee recommends acceptance of these reports. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Crossman. Committee members, does anyone have any questions or items for discussion with Mr. Crossman or for the chair? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to accept the reports as presented to the commission?
Chair, with gratitude to the Audit Division and the subcommittee, as well as its chair, I would move to accept the reports.
Thank you. We have a first from Speaker Yeager, a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Crossman. And I believe we go to part 2 now.
Great, thank you. Again, for the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. Just by way of a quick review, for the reports under today's agenda item 6B, 6 months after the audited agencies submitted a plan of corrective action, the Division of Internal Audit did perform an assessment and issued a report on the status of the implementation of those recommendations. My office then reviews Internal Audit's assessment, and where we feel it is warranted, we request additional information and hold discussions with the agencies. The 6-month follow-up process and internal audit's responsibility are defined in statutes. This process was designed in a way to provide for certain legislative auditors' independence in relation to executive branch agencies in the recommendation implementation process, while still providing us for the opportunity to review and assess the implementation status until implemented to the satisfaction of my office as well as the subcommittee. Under agenda item 5B, you will see another letter from Assemblymember Backus, chair of the audit subcommittee, which indicates that 11 6-month reports were reviewed and accepted at the last meeting in April, on April 15th, of this audit subcommittee. These follow-ups are on audit reports that were issued in September of 2024 and January of 2025. The letter shows the implementation status of the recommendations for 118 recommendations that were made in those audits. At the time of the 6-month reports issued by the Governor's Finance Office, 57 recommendations were fully implemented, 53 partially, and 8 had no action. On page 2 and 3 of this letter, you will see the status of these recommendations based on the Legislative Auditor's Office's assessment as presented to the Audit Subcommittee a couple weeks ago. Since internal audit's assessments, agencies have made substantial progress in many cases towards implementation. As you can see, after reviewing the updated information, we have assessed 98 recommendations as fully implemented and 20 as partially implemented. We will continue to track the status of these partially implemented recommendations with these agencies as they move forward with their corrective action plans, and may ask them to return to subsequent audit subcommittee meetings to update the subcommittee on their progress. Chair, that would complete my report on the 6-month reports. And as noted on the letter, the subcommittee recommends acceptance of the 6-month reports.
Thank you, Mr. Crossman. Committee members, any discussion or questions for our chair or Mr. Crossman?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Dr. Titus, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you very much. These are helpful, and I'm wondering, looking through the second part that you presented on how many were implemented and how many partially and no action whatsoever on a number of them, which has me concerned. And so then do you just circle back at 6 months, and what do we do from here at that 6-month thing that they haven't implemented any of them, and any consequences? What do we do?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So if we're looking at the letter on pages 2 and 3, none of them had no action at that point. They've all taken some actions on those recommendations, if I'm looking at the right thing that you're looking at. The process, so the official 6-month process is defined in statute, and we do that follow-up. But after that, that follow-up is at our discretion. Now, we have a meeting of the audit subcommittee scheduled in August of this year, coming up pretty quick. So in preparation for that meeting, we will work with Chair Backus to identify those agencies she would like to return, or we can provide just a verbal update at that meeting to the members of the subcommittee. The subcommittee has already accepted the 6-month report, which is a formality, must occur for those 6-month reports to be completed, but the follow-up continues in perpetuity. In years past, we've had agencies that have dragged their feet a little bit, and it's not common, but we've had them come back for a period of a couple years to multiple meetings to receive some tough questions from members of the subcommittee. So our goal is 100% implementation of recommendations. Otherwise, I don't want to make them. There are times when recommendations can't be implemented for certain reasons, and we're very reasonable. We work with the agencies and understand things can change. But following and monitoring this is very important for us. It validates the work that we do.
Well, indeed, thank you, sir, thank you, Madam Chair, for the question, but thank you, sir, for all you do and watching out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Titus. Is there anyone else in Carson City? Okay, and I will echo the sentiments of Speaker Yeager and Dr. Titus, having had the honor of chairing the audit subcommittee. I know the good work that gets done there and the good work that gets done by Mr. Crossman and his team. So thank you for all that you guys do. With that, seeing no other questions or discussions, I'd be looking for a motion to approve I have a first from Speaker Yeager, a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Crossman. Okay, that takes us to agenda item number 6. And for agenda item number 6, the appointment of members to committees and similar entities, I am going to turn it over to our interim director, Mr. Roger Wilkerson, who is going to assist us with this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Roger Wilkerson, Deputy Director, for the record. In your packet, you'll see recommended appointments for 5 bodies this afternoon. The Advisory Council on Mortgage Investments and Mortgage Lending, the Commission on Ethics, the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws, the Nevada Commission on Minority Affairs, and the Nevada Silver-Haired Legislative Forum. After materials were posted for this meeting, we received notice from the proposed appointee for the Silver-Haired Legislative Forum that she could no longer serve and wished to withdraw her appointment. As such, we recommend that the Commission not proceed with the Silver-Haired Legislative Forum appointment, but instead consider only the appointments of the remaining 4 bodies. In the interest of time, I won't detail all of the bodies, but recommendations for appointments and reappointments are in your materials, as is supporting information for each body. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or phone a friend as necessary. And if you wish to proceed with these items, the appropriate motion would be to move to approve these appointments, excluding the appointment to the Nevada Silver-Haired Legislative Forum. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Wilkerson. Members, any questions? Okay, any in Carson City? Assemblymember Hafen?
No, Chair.
Okay, seeing none, then I would be looking for a motion as stated by Director Wilkerson. Okay, I have a first by Speaker Yeager, a second by Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. And members, that takes us to our very last agenda item. This is the second period for public comment, and we will be accepting public comment first here in Las Vegas, then we will move to Carson City, and then I will check with AVH to see if we have public comment on the telephone line. In the meantime, if there's anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give public comment, please approach the table in front of the dais. You can begin by stating your name and clearly spelling it. I will remind everyone that public comment is limited to not more than 2 minutes per person. When you are ready, please begin.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. My name is Andrew Cowie. Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Cowie. First name Andrew, A-N-D-R-E-W. Last name Cowie, C-O-W-I-E. That was my first meeting. Don't know how you guys do it. You guys are heroes in my book. You guys are the Avengers. Quick, fast, and in a hurry, brief, brilliant, and gone. The State of Nevada Private Investigators Licensing Board is applying unpromulgated regulations to me as a licensee on in a multifaceted manner. I've called the LCB, I've called the Research Bureau. Every single person that I have spoken to has told me that what I am being forced to do and what thousands of security officers or those regulated under NRS 648 or the NAC are being forced to do something that was never submitted in accordance with the APA. There were no workshops. There was no submission to the LCB, nothing. So my question is short and simple. Can anyone help me stop the PILB from forcing me and thousands of people to do something that was never adopted according to the APA and that the LCB has never approved? Can anybody tell me who can I speak to stop the PLIB from doing this?
Thank you for your comments. We don't take questions during public comment, but we can connect with you after to work with you on this.
Outstanding. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate you being here and sitting with us through this meeting for two public comments. So I appreciate that. I know that I will be reaching out to you to work with you on other conversations we had about information you provided us during the first period of public comment.
Absolutely.
And as the chair of Ledge Commission, I'd be happy to work with you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, members, that brings us to the end of our public comment. Does anyone have anything for the good of the order? Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.